So thank you for joining what is a series of webinars hosted by bluesource. So this one is the Microsoft Teams webinar, struggling with who has access to what in your organization. But before we start, just a big call out from everyone here at bluesource and Torsion, just wishing you and your loved ones all the best, both personally and professionally as well. So we'll begin. So with COVID-19 continuing to impact people and countries around the world, teams everywhere are moving to remote working. By keeping employees connected, regardless of where they're working, companies are adopting various tools to better equip employees to cope with such a crisis. Teams is a collaborative tool that sits over your SharePoint environment that will allow your staff to interact in a chat-based workspace, perfect for the modern way of working. Teams brings together your people, their conversations, and their content for a more productive way of working. But the challenge that Teams present is twofold. Out of the box, anyone can create a team, which can lead to inconsistent naming conventions, inconsistent experiences, and generally a lot of duplication of teams. Owners of teams can delete the team and its data at any time, which can lead to compliance concerns. Ensuring governance of the team's life cycle, from provisioning in life changes and disposition of teams, can be challenging to implement, while still ensuring we don't impact the flexibility of the team's platform. Secondly, who has access to what information decays out of control over time. Businesses are continually evolving, therefore keeping control of access is a difficult thing to do. Now, bluesource have partnered with Torsion and why. So just a bit of background on both organizations. So bluesource helps solves the issue of unstructured teams use for end users and the governance issue with uncontrolled access to corporate data. Our partnership with Torsion allows our clients to solve the access control issues that they face, which allows bluesource the ability to deliver teams environments that allow end users to be compliantly productive straight away. The impact of this allows our clients to have end users who create collaborative teams and content stored, making the right decisions on who should have access with all the productivity benefits that brings. And we've been doing this for the last 20 years globally, with our expertise around compliance and governance moving into SharePoint and our teams for some of the largest and most complex organizations on the planet. And with the current emergency to enable remote working, we are passionately believe that bluesource, with our partnership with Torsion, has never been more relevant. So in this webinar, Tom Billinghurst and Peter Bradley of Torsion will discuss why these ubiquitous problems occur and the reasons why it's been historically so difficult to solve. We'll provide some practical steps that you can take away right now to answer the who has access to which files information question. So great. So with me today is Tom Billinghurst, bluesource principal consultant. So welcome, Tom. Tom's been working with SharePoint since 2010. He's helped numerous clients, obviously, at every step of their SharePoint journey, now into Teams, from on-premise planning and deployments to cloud migration projects. So welcome, Tom. And we also have Peter Bradley. Peter's founder and CEO of Torsion. He founded Torsion in 2014, having spent a career as a consultant specializing in secure information management. His deep understanding of the nature of information flow and lifecycle in organizations enables him to make a powerful and effective contribution to the information security discussion. So Peter, welcome. And myself, John Ford, director here at bluesource, too many years working in the IT industry. I've spent some time at Microsoft, the security organization Symantec, now Broadcom, and the data management company Veritas. So please watch out for some questions. Please, if you can send in your questions, we'll invariably try and get those answered, and enjoy the session. And I will now pass over to Tom. Bear with us whilst we connect. Hi there, Tom. You might just need to turn your sound on, Tom, there if you have it there handy to you.
Am I on mute?
You were on mute. You are now not on mute. So welcome,
Excellent.
Tom. And what we're all learning is how to hit these buttons correctly as well. So thanks, Tom. Listen, I will pass over to you.
Excellent. Thanks very much, John. So yes, as John was saying, bluesource have been looking at the team's lifecycle governance and how we can effectively implement teams within your company in a way which is productive and kind of cuts down on the risk factors. So if we go through just the high level problems, which I think have been sort of discussed briefly earlier, with Teams, as you get it out of the box from Microsoft, it gives you a lot of freedom and a lot of ability to go off and structure it in any way you see fit. Some of the common pitfalls that we've seen, though, is an inconsistent naming convention. So because anyone can go and create a team and they can call it anything, it makes it very difficult for other members of the company to establish what the purpose of that team is, what content should be in there. This can lead to even a duplication where we have some people using abbreviations of company names, some using full names, and again, there's no real easy way to establish if a team already exists and what it's called. So you end up with people creating multiples. The danger you then got then is content gets saved into one and not the other, and you quickly end up with content diverging. Another issue we see is the unintentional sharing of content. So again, this goes back to not having a strict naming convention. So without establishing the purpose of a team, the risk is you start to introduce external bodies into that team and end up oversharing content which is sensitive. Another problem we see quite often is a non-standard approach in terms of the channels and the apps. So Teams is very flexible in the way that you can structure it internally. But with that flexibility comes the risk of having different channel names, different purposes behind the channels, different apps added in. This could lead to unsuitable apps being added, and again, confusion with your team members as to where they should be storing content. And then the final and potentially biggest issue that we have is anyone who creates a team and becomes an owner can just delete that team, and with it, any content and any documents that are stored. Now they fall into the SharePoint recycle bin, so they're valid for 90 days, so there is a recovery point, but it is very, very easy to remove content without realizing, and then going past that time, there is no coming back. So bluesource have taken the approach of implementing a lifecycle governance framework, and that allows us to solve a lot of those problems by having a standard naming convention. So that makes it nice and easy to identify what a team is for, and by extension, kind of what type of content should be going in there. We allow you to see the existing teams easily, so you know if one already exists before asking for a new one. We can then set control on a per teams basis over whether that content is available externally or not. We also offer the option of having templates that you can work from. So rather than having to create a team from scratch every single time, we can look and say, well, actually, we've got a standard template that works for internal projects with the channels and the apps and the policies already set around it. And then finally, we have the option of setting retention policies at the point of creation, so we can avoid or prevent accidental deletion of content outside of any regulations. So what we're going to look through next is kind of how this framework sits together and the elements that we use inside the Microsoft stack to facilitate it. So at the beginning, we have a user interface for requesting teams and making amendments to existing, and we found that Power Apps is an ideal interface. It gives you a nice, slick, mobile-friendly view, very, very powerful, very customizable. The Power Apps will save the information that's being entered into a SharePoint list, so everything is stored in the back end and controlled, and we can govern who has access to that. There is then an approval layer that runs either on Power Automate or Nintex Workflow. It's completely flexible, we can implement either. Once that approval has been granted, there is actually a call out then to an Azure runbook that does all the kind of back end heavy lifting, facilitates the communication with the Microsoft Graph API to establish users and actually create the teams and the groups and everything behind it. And then the end result is your users will see their new teams pop up in Teams. So what we've got next is just a few slides to walk through kind of how the app can look. So this is the bluesource branded one that we are implementing internally. And you can see when you go in to create it to the first screen, you've got the option of creating a new team from a template, asking for a completely bespoke team, or you can look at an existing team. So if we walk through the new team creation process from scratch, we can have a name, and again here we can enforce a naming convention, either through the interface itself or once the data is saved by either appending or prepending an identifier. So that typically we would see either brackets ENT or EXT either at the start or the end of the team, just to help identify the purpose. We can identify and nominate a team owner. Now, what is important here is, as part of the creation process, the team owner is a nominal idea, so the person doesn't actually get team owner rights within the team. So that helps safeguard against changes being made to the team that we don't want to happen outside of an approval process. We can go in and add channels, and we can add apps. So again, here we can define the available options or allow it more freeform. Alternatively, if you wanted to go from a template, then we can have a list of templates that are already created, and these are essentially teams that have already been created and then kind of designated as template sites. So we can reference those and just create a duplicate of them as needed. If we then go back and look at making an amendment to an existing team, then we can see down here all the teams that exist, and we can, again, this can be tailored to say whether it is teams that you are a member of already, or whether this is just all the teams in the business. So again, we're very, very flexible as to what data is shown here. Once any amendments have been made, then that submission is fired into SharePoint. That saves down a data packet that describes all the changes that you want made. And that then triggers the approval workflow process. So we've just got an example here using Power Automate to show the steps that comes through. So in a nutshell, there is an approval request sent, and again, that can be to your IT team, to the line manager, to the owner of the team, whoever is responsible for making those decisions. They then get to see an approval message that comes in, and they can choose whether to say yes or no to the changes. If they say no, obviously nothing happens. If they say yes, then the next step is the workflow makes a call out to the Azure Runbook. And again, this is where all the scripting sits that then goes through and actually creates all the artifacts into in Teams or makes any of the changes. Now, as part of this, as I said earlier, we can set retention policies on the team, so we can stop accidental deletions, we can enforce naming conventions, we can check for duplications. You know, there's a lot of control that you don't get purely from the Teams client here that you can implement right from off the bat. And then once everything has run through, the end user just gets to see a new team created, and that happens in real time without any refreshes or closing down or reopening of Teams to happen. So everything just appears on the screen, and then some emails go through to say sort of what the outcome is. So that's kind of bluesource's approach to the life cycle management of the team itself. And in terms of looking after data security and governance, I'm going to pass across to Peter Bradley from Torsion. So Peter, over to you.
All right, thanks very much, Tom. Let me just share my screen here. Right, so Torsion, we're excited to be partnering with bluesource and bringing this additional capability to market with our partners. So the problem that we're solving here at Torsion is one that we have seen be much prevalent and ubiquitous across just about every information and management and collaboration system that we've ever seen. We're talking about old ones, legacy file servers, all the way through to the modern cloud in Office 365 and Teams. And that is that who has access to what information, it tends to decay out of control over time, right? Most businesses on day one, when they stand up a brand new solution, everything is in relatively good order, everything is straightened out. But over time, it seems to take about 6 months or so for the business to get into a position where it has very little visibility of who has access to what information and very little control of who has access to what information. And it's important to understand that this problem, it tends to occur in a context where, first of all, there is a massive amount of information, hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of files, sites, teams, groups, containers, and also the business itself never stands still, right? The business is a constantly moving, changing target where, you know, new partners, new customers, new suppliers, people changing roles, organizational restructures, which means that who should have access to what is a very complex, constantly changing, difficult to hit moving target. But ultimately, when you have a position where you don't really know who has access to what or control of it, then that can lead you into some very significant security and compliance challenges. So the way that the problem happens, we've done a huge amount of research on this. The problem ultimately boils down to the share buttons and the way the sharing experience works. With the Office 365 stack, including Teams, it's very easy for anybody to share anything with anyone. And so there is nothing to stop people, for example, sharing sensitive information with people who shouldn't have it, or from people having access to something today, but tomorrow they change roles and retain that access that they should no longer have. And this process, it happens hundreds, probably thousands of times a day. And there's a few critical flaws with the way this works, which cause access to get out of control, and this is the problem that Torsion solves. Now, the reason that this problem happens is that historically this has always been thought of as an IT problem, and status quo advice from consultants, experts in this field, has usually boiled down to some combination of you've got to do governance planning and governance processes and resource them fully, even if they may be a little bit tedious, ineffective, expensive. We've got to train all of our users and administrators, put in some IT administration tools. But and the way that these IT admin tools work, they tend to work pretty much the same way. There's a bunch of them on the market. They present to the IT administrator huge, great big long lists of files and folders and items and sites and peoples and groups, and then they expect the IT administrator to manually orchestrate permissions within those big complex structures. But if we think about two clients that we might have worked with in our histories, one client that invested in all of this stuff, all of the processes and training and tools, and then another that chose to invest in none of it, both of those clients have the problem, which means that the way that those tools and their thinking works, it doesn't really solve the problem. It's just not effective. So if we want to genuinely solve this problem, we need to recognize that first and foremost, if you want to make a good decision about who needs access to a piece of information, what are the security and compliance context around that information, and how should access to that information change over time? If you want to make good decisions about this, you need a good, intimate understanding of what the information actually is. And this is where the industry has been going wrong, because IT guys, they don't have that level of understanding of the information. That's not really their job. And so asking them to make decisions about who needs access to something, it leads us into a suboptimal position. Right? So instead, the people who really understand the information, that's the data owners in the business. So fundamentally, any effective solution to this access out of control or data access governance problem, any effective solution to this problem must focus on the data owners in the business and not IT. So the role of the IT administrators in this conversation should be technical oversight of the technology, but not manually orchestrating permissions at a detailed level. And so the business owners that we're talking about, they are very busy. They're not technical. They don't find this stuff particularly interesting, which means that the way that we engage them, we have to make it for them extraordinarily, ridiculously, crazy simple. Right? If we ask them to engage in any kind of complexity or be proactive or spend any kind of time or think in any way, then they're not going to do it. It's not going to work. So we have to make it ridiculously simple for them if we want to engage. So to show you how this works and how the Torsion solution can work for you in your Office 365 environment, as well as in your file shares environment, so on and so forth. So fundamentally, Torsion is built around the idea of empowering business users to make their own decisions about who needs access to their own information, to tell us what is problematic, what is not, how these things should work, how they shouldn't. And then really supporting them by making it extraordinarily simple and intelligent and backed by very powerful, intelligent automation to help you keep your access under control, but do it in a way that is super simple and focused on the business users. So here's Torsion in Teams. And the first thing I'd like to point out before we dive into what we can see here is Torsion is not just a Teams play. It absolutely works in Teams, as I'm going to show you, but it very much equally works in SharePoint Online. So here is Torsion in SharePoint Online. And also in OneDrive and your file shares as well. So the user interface for OneDrive is typically, obviously, your just Windows file share experience. So I can right-click on any object that's been synced using my OneDrive, and here's Torsion running in OneDrive as well. And the same way it works in on-premise and cloud-based file shares also. So to have a bit of a look around the block at some of the things we see here. So with Torsion, we add a new first of all, a new tab or a new into every team and every public and private channel in every team. Now we call this tab sharing and security. Similarly, in SharePoint, we replace the share buttons with the same functionality, which we call sharing and security. And in OneDrive and file shares, it's a right click on the file or the folder in Windows File Explorer, and then we get sharing security from there as well. So the end user experience is exactly the same across all of these different systems. Now, just to have a look around some of the things that we see here, I'm going to use Teams for most of this demo. So first of all, this team is shared with 24 people. Now, if you have an information object, be it a team or a SharePoint site or a OneDrive folder or a file share or what have you, that is shared not just with lists of people, but with domain groups, for example, then figuring out just how many people have access to this object, that can be quite tricky, right? Because you could have dynamic domain groups or deeply complex nested domain structures sitting behind here, which can make it quite hard to know just how many people have access to this thing. So Torsion will unpick all of that for you, first of all, regardless of whatever complexity you might have sitting behind your collaboration systems in your Active Directory and so forth. We can tell you that there are exactly 24 people, including administrators, who have access to this information. Now, keep in mind that so complex is figuring out that number, particularly in SharePoint, Microsoft doesn't even try, right? You click on an average object. It's the moment that a domain group has access to something and you click on the thing that says how many people have access to this, it doesn't even try. What does it tell you? It says lots of people, which unfortunately that's a little bit laughable, but it's certainly not helpful to a business owner who wants to know how many people have access to their stuff so they can help engage with some of these decisions and and spot security problems. Now right away also that's a sense check, right? 24 people have access to my stuff. You can stop. You might be the head of the IT engineering team. You can stop for a moment and go, well, wait, there's only 5 people who report to me. Why are there 24 people who have access to my stuff? So they can then come and see who has access, and we'll show you those lists of people. Keep in mind, this works exactly the same way in SharePoint Online and OneDrive and file shares as well. So there's 25 people who have access to this, in this case, this SharePoint site. We can stop and go, wait, that doesn't look right? And maybe we've just spotted a problem. Now, the next thing is the business owner. So Torsion can automatically can figure out and understand who owns everything, right? This is not just a case of going through and configuring the owner of an object and then they become the owner. There's some deficiencies with the way that works. First and foremost, it's not that easy to always know. Secondly, you might have hundreds of thousands of sites and teams and libraries and folders, and figuring out manually who owns everything and then maintaining that over time as people move. That's not so easy. So Torsion can actually automatically figure out who owns everything. See, the way that Torsion works is that we build a complete index of every single information object in your information estate, every single file, every single folder, site, team, user group, every single instance of a person having access to an object, and every single instance of a person actually accessing an object. We build a complete index of all of it, and then we maintain that index in real time and subject it to deep data mining and data analysis using machine learning and algorithmic and timer-based approaches to figure out all kinds of stuff about your data access governance situation and help you spot problems and get control. So one of the things we can automatically figure out is who owns everything. So who owns this object? There's, in this case, this team. We'll send him a notification. We think you may be the owner. He can accept the nomination. That acceptance can can go through an approval cycle if we wanted to, and then he becomes the owner. So we can automatically maintain our knowledge of who owns everything. The next thing we can do is automatically spot security problems. So here we've decided that the security status of, in this case, this SharePoint site is critical. We've spotted some security problems in here. These are needles in the haystack that Torsion can automatically spot. Security problems such as this person has access to that document and it's not okay. They should not have access to that. Or this file or this site or this team has been incorrectly configured in a way that is breaching your data governance policy. Torsion will automatically enforce your data governance policy for you without requiring any kind of centralized team or manual process to do it for you. Torsion can do it automatically. Now, when we spot those security problems, we send a notification to the business owner to say, we've just found this problem with this information that you're responsible for. Click here to take a look at the problem. Now, these are some of the problems we found, in this case, in this SharePoint site, right? So there's a document library here which has been incorrectly configured and is breaching the governance policy. File here that is being classified by DLP, in this case as the confidential classification, but we have a governance policy that says confidential information is not allowed in this location, so we've picked that up. And then finally, there's a file here that has also been incorrectly configured. Somebody has shared it, broken permissions, inheritance, and breached the policy. So when we send this notification to the business owner, this is what they get. We make this extraordinarily simple for the business owner. They can see what is the severity of this particular problem. In this case, we've decided that this is a warning as opposed to an error or a critical problem, but that determination is made dynamically based on a bunch of different considerations of the problem. What is the classification, the file involved, description of the problem? But ultimately, all we need of the business owner is to make this very simple decision: fix it or ignore it. It is as simple as that. Now, they can ignore it. That's okay. We will remove the problem. We'll set the status back to normal. The fact that they made that decision will absolutely go into all of the reports, all of the logs. With Torsion, you can run a comprehensive security report on any object. You can click on any file, any library, any site, any team, any OneDrive container, anything, and run a comprehensive security report on who has access to this object, who gave it to them, when, how, why. Also, who has actually accessed this object in the last X days. How has access and security configurations and permissions and issues changed over time relative to this object? We can see all of that information for any information object at any time. But most of the time when an information owner gets this question, this is already more than they care about. This is already more than they're probably going to pay attention to. For them, the experience is going to be as simple as, oh, there's a problem. Okay, fix it. And then we do, right? So they can hit that fix issue, and that problem now gets resolved automatically. And all of this functionality applies absolutely in Teams just as well as it does in SharePoint. So we can see there's some security problems here. We can see who has access. We can look at the configuration. We can configure sharing in a way that access will be maintained automatically, where we can automatically grant and revoke access to objects by understanding why they need that access, and automatically control who gets access, who doesn't, and how that needs to change over time. So Torsion is a very, very powerful tool for helping you get ultimate control of who has access to what, right? Regardless of the scale of your information estate, how many sites and files and folders and objects you have, how many people you have, how rapid and complex the degree of entropy that might be happening within your information systems and within your business. Torsion can automatically help you get control and give you perfect visibility of who has access to what across your information estate at any time. John, do you want to take it from there?
Yeah, thank you, Peter, and thank you, Tom, as well. So listen, I got a chunk out of that. I think if I take 3 takeaways, our listeners probably take away something different, is around, go for a templated approach to standardize your deployment. I'd look at building governance and visibility into your deployments, absolutely. And then, as you say, Peter, let businesses, end users decide who's access with the right levels of automation. So appreciate that, guys. Thank you. Just a couple of extra slides, but most important one, we've had a couple of questions. Can you restrict access to a specific channel in a team? Probably a fairly detailed one, but open it out there, guys.
Yeah, Tom, do you want to take the lead on that, and then I can back you up?
Yeah, absolutely. So Teams does support now an approach called private channels. So in addition to setting governance and access to a team in general, you can also restrict access to a particular channel if it is set up as a private channel.
Great. Okay. And then Torsion we can also help tremendously with this. One of the problems that we've seen with private channels, and in particular the way that Microsoft have implemented this functionality, is when a file is uploaded into Teams, it actually lives in SharePoint, right? The team is effectively a skin on top of a SharePoint site from the perspective of information management and collaboration files. Now, the way that they've implemented this, it's a bit nightmarish when it comes to data governance, right? In terms of just understanding, okay, who has access to this stuff, and how do we get control of it? So, for example, you might not know this, but it is perfectly possible to have one set of people who have access to the team and a completely different set of people who have access to the files in the team. Seems ridiculous, but it's perfectly possible, and it's actually not that hard to for the wrong user to accidentally click on the wrong thing and create that sort of access configuration anomaly, and private teams make this even more challenging. So this is one of the things that Torsion can help with, allowing you to click on any object and say, well, who has access to this, who gave it to them, when, how, and why. And we can get control of that. And so we'll help you deal with the access governance challenges that come with not just Teams, but in particular the public, and now also the private channel teams. And the way all of that works, we can help you get control of it and automate that access as well, ultimately for the purpose of making sure that regardless of all this complexity, at the end of the day, nobody has access to anything that they shouldn't have, and everybody does have access to everything that they need.
Cool. And I'm conscious of time as well, so this one could take a lot longer to answer. So maybe a quick, and this comes from Sarah. What are best practices for governance, specifically around team creation, naming, and retention? I know we covered some of that, but just a high-level view of that one. Anyone, guys?
Sure, I'll fill this one first. So, in terms of the naming convention, I think it is kind of down to a business perspective as to how they want to do it. Examples that we've seen before are suffixing the team name with either internal or external. They seem to be the major differentiators. Alternatively, putting, say, INT or EXT at the beginning, just something as a very visual marker to indicate the purpose of the team. I think, as Peter can attest, Torsion allows you to then kind of control who has access, but without knowing the purpose of the team, it's quite difficult to understand who should be even requesting access.
Yeah.
So, sorry, go on.
Sorry, mate. No, you go first. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Okay. So yeah, in terms of a naming convention, there is no best approach, but I think a common sense approach from a business standpoint would be the way to go, and certainly bluesource can work with the company to enforce that naming convention.
Sure. One of the ways that one of the ways that Torsion can add value on top of that as well is particularly around the external challenge, where obviously enabling external sharing in your information estate can unlock all kinds of power and capability in terms of collaboration, but getting control of it is incredibly important. Making sure that nothing has been shared externally which shouldn't be, understanding what has been externally shared and picking up any problems. We've seen plenty of customers that have very much wanted to enable external sharing in their information estate, but have been so hesitant to do so because they know how difficult it's going to be to keep control of who has access to what when external sharing is in the picture, right? That takes the stakes of the problem and raises it significantly. So Torsion can help with that as well. You can click on any object and see, well, has this been externally shared? Has it not? And that's not, is external sharing facility enabled in this tenant or in this site, but this is, has this particular file been shared with an external person? Yes or no? Or help you run reports against, well, show me everything that's been externally shared. Or further than that, show me everything which has been externally shared with somebody that shouldn't have had it. And Torsion can intelligently figure out whether any given external sharing is okay or not, pick up those problems and help you automatically resolve them. So in terms of putting a data governance policy, using naming conventions and whatnot, against teams, that's absolutely a powerful place to start. And then Torsion can very much help you, enforce that and help your users actually live with it ultimately to make sure that they're engaging with information properly.
No, thanks, Peter. And I think there's a lot more depth to go into that question as well, but I appreciate the high level. And I've got one here. Where would you begin on controlling access? How do we start? I think we've got a couple of out of the box helps for that one, but anything anyone wants to quickly add to that question? I think we'll answer that, and I think we've got somewhere where you can start. And actually, sometimes it's actually, from my perspective, is always around, by understanding where would you begin on controlling the access is actually understand what is your issue. So I think we'll cover that, I think, in the next set of slides as well. So chaps, Peter, Tom, thank you very much for that. And I think what we wanted to give the listeners as well is, to that question of where do we start. Sometimes it's we've devised a way of the Torsion proof of value. We try to come up with maybe a better name for it, but let's start with there. It's basically set up a pot within your organization that can, look at showing visibility of, the who has access to what question. Is there an issue with the way you've set up your collaboration type working and access controls? Have you got mechanisms in place to ensure that compliance is effective? And also understanding the next step, is this something to take further? So if anyone's interested on that side, that's a real great product set, shall we call it, that will set up a POC to review that value as well. So I know Torsion ourselves will work with our customers to enable that for them. Speak to your account manager or get in touch with the website to kind of learn more about that. But also bluesource has a number of different steps we've envisaged. So VM, if you can move on to the next slide, with a number of steps. So maybe the first one, a lot of organizations will be on that one. That's that envisaging. You want to move to compliant teamwork, collaboration. Where do you start and begin? So it's that envisaging and bringing the IT and business together and look at a high level implementation and user adoption plan. Secondly, we've got out of the box is the team's lifecycle management automation service. So, what Tom alluded to there was very much around building consistent and standardized templates and best practice built into it, really to ensure that data protection is kept throughout the rollout of teams in your organization. Those two are great, but it always comes down to empowering your workforce. So, if you've got all these great tools, but no one really knows how to use them, sometimes there's a cultural change as well as an education. So we can look at helping with that, engaging the users, enabling the users, but more importantly, measuring that and then being able to push your training and education towards some of the people or departments that need it most. And this is all underpinned then by a real detailed, we've been doing support for our customers for the past 20 years. So full SLAs, out of hours support, switch on, switch off support, all around the Microsoft stack. So that's that reactive, just picking up the call when you've got an issue, or proactive, that's that monitoring and management, right through to delivering the outcomes for our customers as well. So, what you have is ways of seeing the value of what you can do. You've got products that bluesource have put together to quickly enable you to get the value out of the solutions, to enable your end users to work productively. So hopefully today has been useful to all our listeners. Thank you so much for spending the time with us. And be safe. And as I said, reach out to your account management team, reach out on if you don't have one, reach out to us on our website, www.bluesource.co.uk, pick up the phone and speak to us. That's still a way of communicating, always speak. So listen, have a great day, be safe to you and your families, and thank you, and we'll speak soon. Thank you, bye-bye.